Hey everyone, this is Andy again from the Coffee with the Geek show. It is a little too hot for coffee, so I just have my water bottle with my graphite water bottle. If you've never seen the graphite website, I highly recommend it. I have a really great guest as always, and I'm so appreciative that people will come and talk to me on their summer sunny day. But I have Matthew Farber with me, and Matthew is a teacher at Denville, New Jersey, social studies, 6th and 7th grade. He's an Edutopia blogger, which is, if you haven't seen Edutopia, which I doubt you have if you're an education technology teacher, please check it out. It's one of George Lucas started it long ago. And he's a co-host of the Ed Got Game radio broadcast on the BAM Radio Network. He's also won the Geraldine R. Dodge Teacher Fellowship, a Woodrow Wilson History Quest Fellowship. He is part of the New Jersey Council of the Social Studies. You're a board member there. I don't know when you have time to do anything, Matthew, but also a member at large, ISTE Games and Simulations, advisor to Literary Safari. I'm not familiar with that. Maybe you can talk about that. And you have a master's degree in EdTech from New Jersey City University, and you're now an EdTech leadership doctoral candidate. So, a lot going on. But let me also just throw out your personal side. You live in New Jersey, of course. You have a wife, Laura, son, Spencer, and a very interesting dog. Can you tell me the dog title again?
Weimaraner.
Weimaraner. So
yes.
Her name is Lizzie.
Yes, it's a gray and silver color hunting dog, famous for the William Wegman books, and I think there was a series of Sesame Street shorts produced by William Wegman.
Okay, and to wrap things up, you have a couple different places you can connect with. Obviously, Twitter is where I came across a lot of your stuff, and I'll put your website up on the screen here. And you also have MatthewFarber.com website, so that's an easy place to go. I also asked you for your favorite EdTech tools. I'm always fascinated with what people are using. And you said BrainPop, which has been around for quite a while, but keeps on going strong. Google Apps. We could do a whole show on those. iMovie and Audacity. So Audacity also has been around and one of my all-time favorites. So Matthew, thank you for joining me. And I want to just start off with your book, because you've just come up with a new book called Gamify Your Classroom, a field guide to game-based learning. And tell me about that. Wow, that sounds fantastic.
Thanks. The book came out in January, and it's it's a result of about a year of research, primary source research. I spoke to about 50 experts in the field. There's a little description on the bottom of the screen there. Some of the people I spoke to, including Jim G., and Bernie DeKoven, and other researchers like Val Shute from Florida State, and makers in the field as well. The designers of the Mission US games, and people at BrainPop, other academics and teachers, and that sort of thing. It's a very close-knit space. That came about because of my work as an Edutopia blogger, writing about game-based learning, as well as a practitioner in the classroom. It took me a long time to gather lesson plans, and it took a really long time to curate quality games for the classroom. And there were a lot of really interesting conversations going on, different Twitter chats and different conferences, but nothing was housed under one roof, as it were. So I wanted to create a field guide. When I was getting my master's degree, a very influential book we had was Susie Boss and Jane Krause's book, which was a field guide to project-based learning and technology. And it was modeled after that idea. Susie Boss was nice enough to endorse my book. She's an international leader, you could say, of project-based learning. So I wanted something that's very practical, with that somebody else would find very practical, with a lot of links, resources, lessons, explaining what to look for in a game, how games teach, that sort of thing.
So I think an area where we share maybe some common ground is social studies. I was an elementary teacher for years, and one of the things with social studies with me, especially elementary grades, social studies was always my passion at that grade. And I always felt that was my best subject that I was teaching. But inevitably throughout the year, I'd hear kids talk, say, social studies is boring, which would always kind of hurt my feelings because I thought that was the best. But, when we kind of look at it from a child's perspective, especially younger children, social studies, I think, is a dry subject area. Do you think gamification is a way that we can bring social studies to life? Because a lot of the games, even high-powered video games, have history topics as their content.
Right, and I've dabbled a little bit with gamification, and I have the word gamify in my title of my book, but it's a small part of the book, gamification. It's mainly about game-based learning and using games. Interestingly, social studies has had one of the longer histories of using games, in that there's been role-playing and skits for years. All the teachers in my class will have in my building who teach social studies have their classes do skits. And I've always had kids do a mock trial about the Boston Massacre, and they're doing role play and skits. That's essentially a game, right? It's certainly more meaningful than tagging on points and badges. So there's always been a long history of simulation in history classes, and as well as research on simulations being almost as good as being at an event. There's also been a long history of historical fiction to teach. So, you can learn about things collaterally. So you have the main story, then you have the background, which is the history. It would be as if you're learning about World War II by playing World at War from Call of Duty, an older game, or by playing Axis and Allies, the board game, or by watching Saving Private Ryan, or any other historical fiction topic. You could learn about reasons why the Titanic sank just by watching Titanic, even though the actual story is a historical fictional story about, Jack and Rose, right? So the same thing can go for games. And I tell my students this at the very beginning of the year, in that it could be boring because this is all about stuff that dead people decided a long time ago, or it could be very interesting, like Assassin's Creed is historical fiction. So it does have that potential for being interesting. It just really depends on how you decide to teach it. I teach in a very constructivist manner, so it would be much more hands-on, and that lends itself to games and simulations.
You made a good distinction there a minute ago about gamifying and gamification. Can you maybe elaborate on the difference between the two topics?
Sure. Easy question. Again, gamification can mean different things to different people. It can mean layering on game mechanics, which are not actual game mechanics. Game mechanics are really core mechanics, which are actions of play. When you're playing, you are engaged in some sort of actions of doing, right? Okay. Gamification mechanics, if you Google it or something like that, you would often see things like badges, points, gold stars, leaderboards, like that. Like you would see when you go to Starbucks and you switch on your iPhone or Android phone, and you have gold stars, and you have little rewards, and you can level up as a customer, and so forth. But that's not actually all of gamification. That's a layer of playing on people's behavioral psychology and motivation, and in the long term, it doesn't always work out. Just like gold stars don't always work out after a while. I tried it with potty training. After a while, my son just wanted the M&Ms. He didn't want to. He caught on to the system. Gamification can also be the entire experience itself. So Starbucks, when you go into Starbucks, all the baristas are facing you on purpose. There's music playing in the background. It's actually more about the user experience not just all of those little add-ons. The add-ons are just add-ons, right? The whole experience of going there and hearing the music, seeing the menu, and smelling the coffee, because they do grind it on purpose in the store because it's part of that whole aesthetic, right? So that is actually more of a gamification mechanic right there. Game-based learning is playing games, which may or may not have gamification mechanics. There are a lot of really great games out there that don't have gamification mechanics. For example, Gone Home, which is a point-and-click exploration game that will show empathy when you're playing. There's no points or leaderboards there. Monument Valley, which was Apple's App Game of the Year from 2014, and it played a plot point in House of Cards on Netflix last year. No points, no leaderboards, no fail state, no win state. You just play through the game. So to me, those are the differences. I heard a really, really inspirational talk at the Games for Learning Summit in New York City last spring, which I attended. And that was the day before the Games for Change Festival, and it was co-organized by Games for Change and the United States Department of Education. One of the speakers, one of the keynotes, was Cross, is his last name. I think it's Paul Cross from Ubisoft. And he is one of the lead designers of Rocksmith, which is a game like Rock Band, but you actually play a real guitar. You're not just pushing little colored buttons. And the game has something called dynamic difficulty adjustment. And what that does is that when you're playing a real guitar and you're playing chords and you master the chords, the system will give you something more complicated, different chord progression. If you can't do it, if it's too hard and you're not at that level yet, then it will automatically go back to the chords that you're comfortable with. So it's automatically adjusting to your performance, okay? And that is a really great way to have a gamification mechanic teaching you guitar. Because what it's doing is it's doing what Vygotsky wrote about, which is learning where you're a head taller than you are. Playing puts you in a zone of proximal development. You're going a little bit outside of where you should be. And in that regard, gamification can work if that's what it's doing. If it's layering on, points and Easter eggs and things like that, maybe not so much.
That's a great distinction, and thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a powerful distinction when we talk about these things, especially with education in mind. You mentioned the game Mission US, which is kind of I think one of the most well done social studies games out there. I try and talk teachers into digging into it, and I have very mixed luck with it. But can you have you used Mission US and maybe talk a little bit about that?
I've used Mission US, and Mission US is almost like an interactive fiction story with pictures. So you get these choices at the bottom of the screen. You play as a role, and I think, well, it's like anything, really. I mean, I like to look at games the same way you would look at educational technology, through the lens of Larry Cuban. You don't want it wasted, right? Mm-hmm. It's all about using it in the system of the classroom. So if you're going to play a game like Mission US, where the child's going to play from the point of view of somebody historical, a couple of interesting things about how Mission US works. There are rules. You can't change anything historical. It's not like Civilization, where you're creating history and you're interacting, and maybe Genghis Khan wins or maybe he doesn't win. The history actually happens in the background. So what that means is you have to play from a character's point of view, and to make the game interesting, to have agency of that character that you're playing, you have to have a series of meaningful choices put in front of you. So the meaningful choices often are, for example, for the point of view of, let's say, a child, right? So in a couple of the games, or a lot of the games, maybe all, you play from the point of view of a child, and you do have meaningful choices in front of you that a child in that time period would face. You don't have the ability to change whether or not the British won or not, or whether slavery stays or doesn't. You don't have that much authority over history, because that changes the curriculum, right? And it might confuse things, or maybe not. It depends on how you're using the game. So if you just put the game in front of kids to use, they may just play around, they may just click buttons until they get the right answer, they may not make those transferable connections. I think it's helpful for teachers to frame and contextualize the game before students play it, and to extend the roles outside of the game to help enable knowledge transfer. For example, play the game and then present a challenge that wasn't in the game and to a student, and have them answer it from the point of view that they were playing in the game. So it depends on how you play the game. Does that make sense?
It does completely. And actually, I think I agree with your point. The teacher is still the key facilitator of the learning. And what I liked about Mission US is it provided all the kind of background resources as well, including like primary source documents, just really a list of high quality documents that correspond, that I think are really designed for teachers to bring to life with their students beyond the game. So I really thought it's a well done, I don't even want to call it a game. It's more like a collaborative enterprise.
Well, I mean, it's hard to get, it's easy, I should say, to get caught up in definitions, right? Mm-hmm. But, we'll call it a game, right? So there are different ways you can come at a game like that. So I think what's really helpful about that game is that the barriers to using it are very low. So you don't have to go and request for a technology person to install it into the computer, or to if for some strange reason it's blocked at a school, it's on PBS's website. It's also one of the missions, the Cheyenne mission, is on BrainPop's Game Up platform, which you can play for free there. So there are a lot of ways to get at the game, and the game is very simple to bring to students. So that is certainly helpful. I think there may be still trepidation from two other points of view, though. One is that students are going to be just staring at screens in school, replacing the teacher. And I think that's a misconception. I use 3 different textbooks in our school, in my classroom, teaching social studies, as a resource. That's not how I teach. And none of the teachers in my school do. And, I don't think you'd be pretty hard-pressed to find a teacher who is enthusiastic about teaching literally going out of the textbook. It's certainly not what the National Council of Social Studies would recommend. So it's like any other resource. You would, I think a really interesting way to come at it would be to have students play it at home, and then come to class and play the same missions again with another student together, collaboratively, and then have them reflect on how the decision-making process was different with 2 students instead of 1 student. Kind of come at the game in different ways, than rather just have them sit in front of a screen and play the game. The other unanticipated barrier to using games in the classroom is that students may often assume that the game is going to be horrible because of their long history of playing terrible educational games. And in that regard, there is some selling that has to take place about why the game is fun to do and what's interesting about the game.
Yeah, I remember a quote from Allie Karchelman that said most of the old video games in school were just flashcards.
Yeah, just digital flashcards. A couple of things happen here. So first of all, you have mental models, right? You think something's going to happen. Games have affordances, right? Affordances are like, if you see a doorknob, you know that should be turned, right? Or if you see, you open up an iPad and you see the arrangement of the icons for apps, they want to be touched, right? So that's an affordance. The games have affordances in them. They also have constraints, just like other designed objects do. And they have signifiers, which might be like flashing arrows, that sort of thing. When you're playing a game and you see an affordance, and the affordance creates a mental model. That means if I touch this app, the app will open. If I bring my little avatar character to a door with a key, the door will open. if I shoot an alien, the alien will blow up. What happens is if you shoot the alien and all of a sudden you are encountered with a long division problem, that mental model you have of what you're expecting to happen gets destroyed. And that's what game designers call chocolate-covered broccoli, where what you expect to happen doesn't happen. You're encountered with learning. The learning becomes an obstacle that you have to overcome. And if you have to overcome the learning as an obstacle, it actually makes the learning less fun. It makes it something you don't want to do. So a really great example of not doing that is the algebra game Dragon Box, where you're just dragging icons from one side to the other, because the mechanic of play there, the core mechanics or actions you do, is balance. So by balancing both sides of an equation sign, you are actually doing the your expectations for your mental model come through, and you are learning. The other issue there is that educational games and content delivery games may have too many structures in place, and they may inhibit learning from playing. What's so wonderful about Minecraft is that there aren't that many structures, except for the blocks being 1 meter by 1 meter and the other rules in the game. You have a lot of freedom to play there, not all the structures in place that just lock you in some sort of content track. So you're going to do really good in your Common Core assessment because this game is just locking you there and there's no freedom to learn by playing.
Those are all really powerful points. I just want to say one more thing about Mission US. Forgive me for coming back to it, but it's
Sure.
a game I rarely get to discuss with people. But one of the things I liked about seeing that game is that they incorporated music from the time in
Yes.
it, and you actually play like a rock band type interface where you play a flute to the music of that time period. And that's a weakness of mine as a former social studies teacher, is I didn't put the music of the times in there. And I know the kids will think it's corny and that sort of thing, but I think music has a way of also imprinting kind of knowledge and the culture of the times with it.
Yes, there are some fun ways you could do that by juxtaposing modern music and music of the time. You could take a song. There aren't too many political songs these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of went the way of the heyday of Crosby, Stills and Nash. But I think the most recent one I remember was one Prince wrote for Ferguson, except it was critique for being too poppy, too upbeat. But right? But you can still play a newer song and then play an older song, and or analyze the lyrics that way, right? And the same goes for a game like Mission US. Mission US actually is very fun to not to critique, but to deconstruct with students, because what it is it's a series of conditional loops where you do this and this happens and then this and this happens, and it's branch storytelling. So it's interesting to go through that, what happened, and also some of the lesson plans they provide are quite interesting. It's important to play the game as a teacher first to make sure that the game is fun, and then you can throw out little obscure references. Did anybody encounter so and so, or did you see the dog yet? Did you help find the missing dog yet? Mission 1. So it's helpful in that regard also to play the game. And also, it's important when you bring the game to the classroom, I've been finding, to pilot it, because that's what other companies do. They have focus groups, they pilot it, and then they get feedback, right, about their user experience. So I used an interactive fiction tool in the classroom called Inkle Writer, and I had some students play it first over a couple of days before we did the project. I don't want to say, you guys are going to love this. We're going to write stories using only words, no pictures, and you're going to read each other's stories. And it's going to be like a choose your own adventure book. It might be fun for me, but it's not necessary to a focus group, get the feedback, whether or not they think it's engaging to do, and then have them help introduce the lesson along with the teacher. So you have that whole spirit of co-design and co-participation in learning, not just, I think it's great, we're going to do this.
Yeah, I agree. And I've always encouraged when I've shown teachers Mission US and we try to do some workshops with it is to let them play through the whole game so they know what it looks like, feels like, and again, to draw those extra comparisons. So moving beyond Mission US, sorry, I got you locked into that one.
No, it's good to have an example and go through that, right?
Yeah. Where do you see schools in 10 years, or where would you like to see them in 10 years?
I see schools the same way that Henry Jenkins, right? I don't know if your listeners are familiar with his work on participatory cultures and some of his work on fan fiction and also his work on transmedia. And I think it's like transmedia. I don't think any one model will persist. I don't think there's going to be the silver bullet, like, MOOCs are going to replace colleges altogether, or every learning is going to be personalized and individualized by a computer delivered to a student. I think it's just going to be a complete blend of what we're seeing now. And there will be, I don't know, it's to say that we'll have no traditional schooling that we have now. There are a lot of forces in play that want to keep schooling traditional like we have now. Some of them are good. Like, you don't want to completely do away with schools as is. The changing of the factory model of school, that's been attempted before too. But I think ultimately it's going to be a mix of different ways of formal and informal learning. I think in some way what we have now will still persist, good or bad. We still have records, right?
Yeah, we do. Yes, I do, in my garage. Can you tell me who, you've mentioned, I think, quite a few people in passing here, but who are some of your inspirations professionally?
Professionally, I like the work of Jim G because it's so influential, and he's very approachable. I met him at a Games Learning and Society conference this summer, and he's very approachable. There was a professor I met there, also at the same conference, Kevin Werbach from the University of Pennsylvania, from Wharton School of Business, and he did a MOOC for Coursera on gamification. And I talked to him about some of the people that talked to me when I was interviewing people for the book, and it was interesting. He noted that the real people are the ones who are very approachable, helpful, reply to your emails. They're not there to show off their academic plumage. They're really helpful, and he's one. Very helpful. And there are a very long list of people. Everybody I spoke to in my book it was extremely helpful. It was like having my own personal, one-on-one course with an expert every week, doing an interview.
I like that term, academic plumage. I'll have to coach you with that one when I tweet out some of the quotes from this. Yeah, I think I have one of his books right here, as a matter of fact. Still working through it. His What Games Have to Teach Us About Learning Literacy. So,
such a great book, very influential, and I could send him an email, and I've done it before, even before my book came out. He was, he took an interview for my book, right? Busy guy. And there are lots of people like that, and I find that in the game-based learning community that everybody's very. It's been described as a movement as well. It's people are really enthusiastic. It's very grassroots.
Okay, well, I did promise you that I'd get you out by 3:30, and we're coming up on the 3:30 hour. But I do just want to say, your book, it's on my Amazon list, so it's up next for me. And I hope people will go out and check that out, because I think it's an important, new trend in education, and I think what you've done with it is very powerful stuff. Also, your podcast, Ed Got Game. I'm definitely going to keep checking those episodes out. And I think, did you interview Kay Novak? Did I get what?
No, she's going to be one of the hosts as well on the game-based learning show.
Yeah, Kay's a awesome person, super dynamic. Learned a lot from her as well about gaming and gamification. But we'll go through some Speed Geek questions if you don't mind. I've got my
Sure.
Decide Now app, and maybe that can hit on some of the little tidbits of questions I was going to ask you, but this is the I Decide Now. I hit 3 questions, and they can be quick, short answers and to the point. So question number 1 is...
Is that spinning like a...
Yes, it spins around like a kind of a Jeopardy game.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
this is your favorite video game.
Assassin's Creed 2.
Oh, all right. What's the topic of that one? Is that middle?
The Renaissance.
Oh, Renaissance. Nice.
Yes.
Yeah, I have number 3. And the next one is, what was your first computer?
Commodore 64.
All right, mine too. I've still got mine. It gave up a long time ago, but I kept it anyways. Okay, and question 3 is your favorite educational blog.
That is a great question. There's so many, right?
I know. It's a tough one.
I would have to say Edutopia.
Agreed. It is a great one. I'm just going to throw one more out there, and that is Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
All right. Can we see your Star Wars t-shirt?
Yes, I have a Star Wars t-shirt on.
All right.
Old school.
Yes, definitely. So, Matthew, thank you so much. Your work is truly inspiring. I'm really looking forward to getting your book and keeping up to date with your radio network and Edutopia. Some great resources. Thank you.
Great. Thanks again.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your summer, and good luck next school year.
Thank you very much. You too.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thanks.